Alright, let's start with this. We got this basic map here, and what we're going to do is we're going to go through all sorts of stuff related to entities. There's a ton to talk about, and we absolutely will not get to all of it, and I'm going to ramble a lot, but hopefully it will be useful in some fashion. So this is what we had last time, yeah, it's a mess. We're just going to mostly ignore it, but we'll leave it there for reference. Entities generally start with the entity tool. However, it's also possible for them to start off probably as prefabs. Generally, things like these basic entity prefabs or for Dire or Radiant allow you to place all of the things you need to start your game. Once you place them, you can collapse them by right-clicking and go to Collapse here, and then using the Object or Mesh selector in order to select them. You can see there's player start bad guys, player start good guys over here, light info entities, all these, things that are related to your game. Typically, you just throw it on your map, you're going to be good to go. These guys are the basics. If you hit Shift E, you can place any type of entity, though. And it will let you, with any of these entities up here, there's a whole ton of them, and I'd say 50% of them do nothing. Because they're for Source or Source 1 or something like that. Either way, there's different things you can do. Like, this is an info target entity that I put here. It just shows by this. It doesn't have a model or anything like that it uses in game, but it will exist at runtime as something you can find. So if I name this target something, now when I'm in game, I can actually find this and I'll be able to pick up this position. So I can use these info targets in order to place things on the map that I want to work with in code later. So that's one of the useful entities, and also one of the basic ones, luckily. We don't have to talk much more about it. Other than that, let's see. There is you can place individual trees, and this might seem weird, right? Because we have a tree painter in the tile editor. So why would I do this? And the answer is that there are a lot of other trees that are not planted by any of the tile editor stuff. These or cannot be placed on the tiles you're used to. For example, like if you're using a Radiant desert, you can't place these dead trees. They won't place with the editor or whatever. But I can place them here. And also need to scale them down so that it sort of fits better with its G and V position. But yeah, you can place them individually, and placing things like that individually kind of stinks, but there are better ways to do it, which we can look at later. But yeah, this is how you place just about any of these entities. There aren't that many that are going to be useful to place out of here. Some of the more potentially useful ones are world bounds. If you place this, what it's going to do, actually let's turn off all light and go to full bright so that we don't have that. What this does is it's going to set up the boundaries of your world for camera purposes. If you click the bulb, you get a translation tool. You can pull it out and to the top. There's actually, this world bounds, basically it lies. This is the camera bounds, not the world lookout bounds. So what it's actually going to do is potentially let you, move the camera to this position. And then you're seeing all the way off the edge of the map. If you wanted to bring it in here, you might have to pull it farther this way. But from here, you can still see to the side here a decent bit. So sometimes you got to experiment with them. It's kind of annoying, but if you just you keep building the map with different world bounds in it, you can eventually get it right. Just make sure that the one on the right is higher than the one on the left, or it could get confused. In a similar fashion, there's Dota minimap boundary. Instead of placing one, though, this one you place two of them. So if we place one here. Then you place a second, and I'm just going to use the translation tool so I can clone from this, pull it this way, and then pull it up. And now what I've got is one, well, it's way too high. That's a little bit better. So now I've got two minimap boundaries, entities, and they're effectively defining the minimap, so that if I hit F9, if I were to build this map and check create minimap on load and then build it, it will create the minimap from those boundaries. Generally, it's going to sync up with your world bounds, but it's also possible you want people to look outside, but have the minimap only, show a playable area. Let's see. I'm trying to do ones that don't show up in the basic entities. There are things like the particle systems, but it's usually easier to just drag and drop them onto the map. And now we have this info particle system on the map. So this will just play. It'll just play, use this particle on your map where I put it, and yeah, you don't need to know much other than that. Info particle system is pretty much always the way to go. There's like Dota world particle system. I don't know what the difference is. I always use info particle systems, and it seems to work fine. There's the shops, which you can place manually, but again, there are prefabs for this. Somewhere in here. Yeah. Typically, you can place these manually and get what you need out of them. There's got to be one other thing I'm trying to think of. It's just not coming to me. Oh, right. So there's also the ability to place NPC Dota base. And what this lets you do is place, individual units on your map. And more importantly, there's in the object properties, there's this unit name. And so you can select any of the units in the game that exist. But as part of your custom game, you also get to define units in your own NPC units custom.txt file. And once you have them in there and you restart your entire tools, not just Hammer, not just your game, but the entire tools, they will exist in here and you will be able to select them. You can also search for stuff, but you'll be able to select them and place them. And then you can literally just place your own custom, encounter, enemies, what have you, in the game with NPC Dota base. In a similar, there's also like you can place individual buildings that have certain properties, mostly just block areas off from pathing. The fort, which is the ancient. Again, these all come with prefabs that exist if you're trying to make something that's Dota oriented. There is things like the Roshan Spawner and that has to do with where Roshan spawns. It's a lot of this stuff is very Dota specific, so if you want to get into that, you can really, there's a lot of stuff on the wiki for Dota specific stuff. I don't do as much of that, so I don't have as much information to talk about on that. Yes, okay, so here we go. So here is a couple other useful ones. This is ENT. Come on, I keep typing. ENT Fog of War Revealer. So we place this. What this is going to do is reveal Fog of War in the area of the circle or the sphere that's shown in the wireframe there. You can translate it, you can rotate it, it doesn't really do anything, and you can't scale it directly. You have to set the vision range manually in the property browser. So I can set this up to 1500 here. I think 1800 is fine. I do not know if you can go higher than that. A lot of things are capped at 1800, but if it were capped at this, I could literally just do this. Now I've got two of them. If I select both of them, I can even see the overlap in the Fog of War. So everything here would be shown. Also, for these entities, you have team numbers. And so you can assign to which team it should be displaying things. So like if it's the base, maybe I only want custom 1 to see it, or good guys, which is radiant, bad guys, which is dire. Unassigned, I'm fairly certain will reveal it to everybody. I'm not 100% on that, but I think it does work that way. You can select two things and you can clone them like this if I want to, cover the rest of the area like that. And now when I select them all, you can see that I've pretty much covered these two, more or less, the whole of these things in Fog of War revealers. On the other side of things, there's Fog of War blocker nodes. Now these I don't have as much experience with, but I can show you how Valve built them. So what Fog of War blocker nodes are set up for is... Oh, I don't have Snap-on, do I? I don't. Fog of War blocker nodes are set so that they will block out the fog when placed. Oh, it's clipping to the edge like that. Okay. When placed in these, I gotta turn this down. There we go. When you place them like this. So if I clone these out like this. Should have done this this way. Okay, now this is how Valve does it. They just set them up like this, and what it is that when you come to this point on the map, if you're here, you won't be able to see inside, and if you go inside, you won't be able to see out. It's how it's used in the for the Roshan pit fog blocking. There are things in here like target node. It tells you the name of the entity which fog of war is blocked, or between which it's blocked. I don't know. They don't seem to use that, and it seems to work fine. I haven't explored this enough to know for sure, but that seems to work. One other thing I just thought of, point simple obstruction. It's potentially pretty useful. I keep thinking of other ones. Okay, point simple obstruction. This lets me place these objects on the map that do block. They're like trees, kind of. They're more controllable trees. You can see they actually show up in the grid navigation as purple, and that means that they can be dynamically turned on or off in order to block things. So if I were to start this disabled, it probably won't show there. But basically, you can have them disabled or enabled, and you can dynamically change that status from Lua, from the script, or from actually map logic stuff. But I don't usually recommend doing map logic. But here, you can also have them block vision or not. So it can be, you know, a gate that you can see through, or a door that you can't, and that sort of thing. I believe that's also configurable from Lua. The way to do that generally is to name them. Like, this is a barricade or something like that. But we're going to name all of these barricade. And that way in Lua, I can find all by name barricade. They're all going to be these point simple obstructions, and I can set them to be enabled or disabled, and I can raise or lower the barricade. It's invisible entirely. These do not show up in game as an obstruction. It's just a point that you can't see or walk through that can be adjusted. So in terms of lighting, we have this ENV deferred light. So this is potentially useful for lighting up, for adding, you know, individual lighting areas or whatever. Let's give it a blue and 300, and we'll up the intensity to, like, I don't know, 50 or something. It's really intense. But anyway, so what we've done now is it's added this, and it's just going to light up everything that goes through there. It's way too bright to be, you know, reasonably used, but the idea is, of course, you can play with the settings, color, radius, and intensity in order to get appropriate light. Same as everything else. You can clone them, move them around. I don't know how expensive these things are. There seem to be shitloads of them all over different places, so I wouldn't expect it to be that bad to have a ton, but there's obviously, you know, ways to do things that are better than others. I'm not the guy to necessarily talk to on that sort of thing. And I think that's just about all that I can think of from the perspective of just random entities. So let's talk about the ones that came with the basic entities. We have, I mentioned the player start bad guys and good guys, but there's also one, player start Dota, which you need in order to set for the custom teams. Good guys and bad guys cover you for good guys and bad guys here, though you can use Dota for all of them, but you can come in here and set them for custom 1, custom 2, etc., etc. If you do not have at least one spawn point for each team that you want to have on your map will crash when people try and spawn in. So you need to make sure that you have at least one of these player start Dotas on your map for each team that you're going to use. If you have multiple ones, I believe it randomly chooses which spawn point people are going to use. I don't know that for a fact, but I think that's random. You do only need one, though, and things will work okay at that. There's also info courier spawns, and I believe this also has courier spawn that you can set for customs. It doesn't have the Dota at the end, it's just info courier spawn, but yeah, there's good guys, bad guys, and just regular that lets you set where the courier will spawn for each team when it dies, if it dies. That's useful if you do a game mode with couriers. Now we've got these entities that are, if not necessary, then generally good to have for your map in order to control various things. I've not played with a lot of them. Generally, it's just a good idea to, you know, take a look at the properties they have and see if you need to mess with them. Like, here is the water LOD control, level of detail. So it starts the transition to cheap water in terms of how it renders things at this range. I don't know if it's going to be visible, but it might even work in the game. So if we're looking at water and we get really far out, it's going to start like doing crappy simulations because we can't even see it. Honestly, I've never changed this value. I don't think it matters that much. If you have a ton of water, I don't know, maybe it would. But even then, you're usually going to be close enough and only seeing stuff that you're rendering anyway, so I wouldn't worry about it. Fog Controller is about really more making clouds than anything, if I'm not mistaken. No, sorry, I am. That's a different entity. This is about the fog on your map. If we go to full bright, if we go to all lighting, we can see that there is this fog going on here, but actually we need to... Here, if we select the light info, it's showing us how the game is going to be lit. And we have this blue fog going on. The fog controller... Oh, you know... I don't know, the fog controller is weird, because all the fog settings that are going to be used by your game are in here. So I don't know what this one does. I was thinking it was something else. Okay, we're going to ignore this one, because now I've confused myself. This is the environment wind. This is... used for certain particles have an external wind force that can act on them in order to, you know, blow around smoke or fire or things like that. And this has, yeah, normal. You can change the speeds, the gusts, the radius that the wind effect applies to. If you want to have multiple ones of these, you can place them around and have individuals. So you can have a really gusty area over here, and then just everywhere else is far less gusty. Gust durations, direction changes, and stuff like that. It can really give you, you know, like a rainstormy kind of feel if you have those particles involved. If you don't have particles that are using wind, I think they might affect like cloth and stuff like that. I don't know that for a fact though, so don't quote me on it. But you can mess with this if you need that sort of thing. I'll talk about light info later. Game events, I think this might be even like sort of discontinued. I don't know. It's used for these trigger events and stuff like that, which I'm not going to talk about much, but there's a lot you can do with this stuff if you like map logic. I absolutely hate it. I can't stand it. I think it's terrible. I use it pretty much only for setting up triggers, and otherwise it just seems like it's just wasting my time when I could be writing code instead of, you know, fiddling around with GUI interfaces. Global light. So this defines sort of the general settings of your of lighting in your game, and mostly has to do, from what I've seen, with like shadows. In which direction is the sun, for lack of a better term, and how is it going to show the shadows. So you can mess with this, and also the shadow color and stuff like that, and various specular settings if that's what you're into. But it is for the whole map, the entirety of it, the global. Tone map controller, it's about brightness and shit like that. Never mess with it. Okay, so and Dota light info. This to me is a very useful one. I've used this in my map in order to give different light colors, settings, intensities, and stuff like that to different areas on the map. And it allows you to color things by day and night. It allows you to change the fog, the actual fog, this blue fog here, color, and it lets you change the specular colors and the fog of war colors as well. A lot of this stuff is very, very, very useful if you're trying to set things up differently. One thing you can do is also change where the fog starts, so that it just starts, you know, farther out at day and night. I don't like the fog as much. It's not as useful. It's not fog of war. Fog is the like stop rendering here kind of fog than it is the actual fog of war, which is still governed by the standard visibility things in your game mode. But yeah, you can change the color a day, so like we can really darken it out. It's a lot darker now. Change the ambient color, which is going to, you can see, adjust how things are sort of highlighted a bit. Shadow color is going to be harder to see, but you can, you know, see it on the ridges here and stuff like that. If you need harsher shadows or softer shadows, there's also, yeah, scales that you can play with, ground scales and things like that on all of these. Specular color, which again is harder to see. You can sort of see it on the edges of these rocks here, things like that. All of these you can play with, and as long as you've selected this, you can see how it's going to more or less look in your game. I don't know what height fog color does. I've never seen that come into play. Other options that are interesting, outer radius here. We can adjust this so that it only applies in this area. And then what we can do is if we say we drag this over here, if we select them both, you can see that there's this overlap. So when you're in this overlap of outer radii, then the light info settings from this is going to bleed and transition into the light info settings from this one. So if we change the color to lighter, then when you're over here, it's going to be darker. And as we move over here, it's going to transition to this lighter area. And that makes for a pretty cool effect in game that you can use in order to make sort of like biomes and things like that that have different light styles and everything. That's what I use. Inner radius is about like full effect. Like if I set this to 2000 so they're the same, now there's no transition. The second you touch this one and you're within its inner radius, you're going to get the full effect of the light change instantly. So that's the lighting related stuff that I know about. There's, I'm sure, other things you can do and a lot more that I'm just not as familiar with because I'm not an artist, 3D or otherwise, and it can be tough. Oh yeah, so make sure you have on all lighting. If you don't, you won't see the changes. Oh, one other thing. When you come down here in the properties, there's a preview for night. And you can change that and see how your light info has changed at night. So this is, a cooler blue. We can make it like a really dark blue. This is way too dark, but you get the picture. You should be able to change all of that. And there's a lot more with entities. In fact, actually, let's jump into one more tool that's very useful with entities, or is at least vaguely related to them, and it's the spray tool. I'll show you how I did this for my hunter game mode. Spray tool is kind of like, it lets you throw down a bunch of stuff in random fashion that paints on the surfaces. It's a bit tougher to use than like the tile editor for sure and everything else like that, and all it's going to do is paint prop statics initially. There's like, you can change the count, the spacing between things, your brush radius stuff is the same as before, and you can change how things scale, pitch, yaw, roll, and stuff like that. But basically you paint and it's going to give you like this sort of thing. So I can make these neat crystalline formations just by, setting this up. You can also save the preset to, wherever you want and reload it later so that you can, adjust these settings however you want and hold on to it. Once I have this, I can, select all of these, or most of them, and then I can just mess with it however I want. So these are all prop statics, but I could change those entities if I wanted, but I can also change the colors and make them, like this sort of thing. Let's do another one with trees. So this, let's clear the brush settings. I can come in here, let's grab some of these dead trees. So I can select multiple ones in here and drag them all at the same time. So now I have trees. I can drag like this. There's a lot of them, so it's going to paint like this. And see this, it doesn't have the right tree spacing, so I'm going to actually see if I can boost it a little bit. Either way, when I do this, I can select it. I have to deselect that. Once I select all these, instead of doing prop static, I'm going to change it to int Dota tree. When I do that, they're going to move themselves. What happened? Oh, I have some extra shit selected. Alright. Doesn't matter. I accidentally hit the wrong key. But yeah, these are now real trees. You can eat them with tangos, you can cut them down, they block vision and everything else like that, and yet they're not part of the regular tile map, which also lets me, mess with their colors really easily and stuff like that, so I can do really weird things with them if I like to. Or I can make trees out of stuff that has no business being trees, like pumpkins and stuff like that. The spray tool is very powerful, but it's also easy to get carried away, and I can say that I probably have gotten carried away myself, and with it sometimes, just for messing around. I also honestly don't know, like some of these settings don't seem to work all that well, or they just don't do what I think they should, which isn't necessarily the same thing as not working well. But yeah, I mean, that's more or less how entities work. Place info targets, place points of obstructions, place your Dota bases, your creatures and stuff like that, and all of your starting points and lighting. That's about it. Everything else is terrain and particles and stuff like that. So I'll probably cut it here. So thanks for watching. Hopefully that made some sense, because I was probably really rambly.